The wind cut across the Wyoming prairie like a blade, sharp enough to steal the breath from anyone foolish enough to walk through it. Snow whipped sideways in blinding sheets. The land was nothing but white and silence, a world stripped bare. And in the middle of that frozen emptiness walked a young woman who looked like she had no business being alive at all. Sarah Wittmann stumbled forward, leaving faint drops of blood in the snow from the thin soles of her worn-out boots. Her shawl was so thin it might as well have been paper. The cold bit at her skin, numbing her fingers until she could no longer feel them. She had been walking for 3 days, running from another town that had turned against her, running from voices that whispered rumors louder than she could defend herself, running from a past that chased her across every mile of open land. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Each step felt heavier than the last. She tripped over a rock hidden beneath the snow and fell to her knees. For a moment she stayed there, the icy ground seeping through her dress. Maybe this was the end. Maybe the cold would take her, and she could stop fighting a world that seemed determined to break her. But some part of her refused to give up. She pushed herself to her feet, gripping the small bundle she carried, the only belongings she had left. She moved forward blindly, guided by nothing but desperation. The wind howled around her, drowning out her thoughts. Snowflakes gathered in her hair and lashes until she could hardly see. Then she saw it, a faint glow through the storm. She blinked, convinced it was another trick of her freezing mind. But the light held steady. A window, a home, smoke rising from a chimney, a chance to survive one more night. Sarah forced her body forward, each step harder than the last. She finally reached the wooden porch and lifted her numb hand to knock, but the sound was barely a whisper. She tried again, harder. The door swung open. A man filled the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of warm earth. His face was rough from long days outdoors, his expression guarded. He looked at her torn dress, frost-covered hair, trembling hands, and the desperation in her eyes. "Please," she managed, her voice shaking the storm. For a long moment he did not move. She could see the debate in his eyes. A lone woman showing up in a blizzard was trouble. Everyone knew that. But she also knew he saw the truth, that if he closed the door, she would die right there on his porch. He stepped aside. "Get in." Sarah stumbled into the warmth. The ranch house was simple but welcoming. A stone fireplace glowed in the corner. Handmade furniture filled the room. A bed sat behind a curtain. Everything was clean, practical, lived in. The home of a man who survived alone. She swayed on her feet, the heat almost painful after so much cold. "Sit before you fall down," the man said, pointing to a chair. She obeyed, sinking into the warmth of the fire. Her whole body shook as the ice began to melt from her clothes. The man returned with a heavy blanket and draped it over her shoulders. "Drink this," he said, handing her a steaming tin cup. Coffee, slow sips. Sarah took a drink. It burned all the way down, but the heat spread through her chest like life returning. "Thank you," she whispered. The man studied her with quiet caution. She felt him taking in every detail, trying to piece together the story she carried in her eyes. "Name's Clayton Reed," he finally said. "This is my ranch." "Sarah," she replied softly, then quickly added, "Just Sarah." Clayton nodded. He did not push for more. He added wood to the fire, the flames rising higher. "Storm's going to last the night," he said. "Maybe longer." Sarah lowered her eyes. She knew what he was saying. She could stay until morning, but then she'd need to move on. She was used to that. One night, one meal, one mercy before being pushed back into the cold world. But the thought of stepping back into that storm made her chest tighten with fear. "You can sleep here," he said, "by the warmth." Sarah nodded, grateful beyond words. She watched him in the firelight. His movements were steady, practiced. His face carried the weight of someone who had known more loss than he cared to speak of. When he sat down to repair a piece of leather by lamplight, Sarah studied him quietly from behind the blanket. There was something about him that felt solid. A man who did not scare easily. A man who chose loneliness over the wrong company. A man who had opened his door to a stranger in the middle of a deadly storm. Sarah's eyes grew heavy as the warmth wrapped around her. For the first time in months, she felt safe enough to close them. The wind screamed outside, but inside the cabin the fire crackled with life. She let the sound carry her into sleep, knowing tomorrow she would face another storm, inside her heart and out in the world. But for tonight, she was warm. For tonight, she was safe. For tonight, she was not alone. Morning came with a gray, heavy sky and wind that shook the walls of the ranch house. Sarah woke wrapped in blankets near the fire, warm for the first time in days. Clayton was already up, moving quietly around the room as he melted snow for water and checked the fire. "You're awake," he said without looking up. "Good. The cattle need tending. Storm or no storm." Sarah pushed herself up. "I can help." Clayton paused, turning toward her with a doubtful look. "It's dangerous out there. You step off the path even a few feet, and the snow will swallow you. The barn's only 50 yards from the house, but in this weather, it might as well be 50 miles. "I meant what I said last night," Sarah answered firmly. "I won't be a burden." He watched her for a long moment, then sighed. "There's a coat and mittens in the trunk. They were my wife's. You'll need them." His wife. The words hung between them for a breath. Sarah nodded, trying not to let emotion show. She found the coat in a cedar trunk at the foot of his bed. It was warm wool, well-made, and it fit her almost perfectly. When she stepped outside with Clayton, the cold hit like a hammer. The wind pushed at them violently, the snow swirling so thick it blurred the world into white. Clayton tied a rope from the porch to the barn door. "Hold on to it," he instructed. "Don't let go, no matter what." They fought through the storm together, leaning their weight into each step. When they reached the barn, Sarah gasped in relief. The cattle stood inside, shivering, hungry, lowing softly. "The water barrels are frozen solid," Clayton muttered. "We'll have to break ice and melt snow." They worked side by side. Clayton hauled snow and broke ice while Sarah spread hay and grain. Despite the cold biting through her gloves, she found a strange comfort in the work. It felt real, honest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Then Clayton stopped suddenly. "One of the cows is in trouble," he said, kneeling beside a large heifer lying on her side. Too early, storm must have pushed her into labor. Sarah knelt beside him. "What do you need?" Clayton looked at her with surprise. "You've done this before?" "My uncle had a small farm," she said. "I helped with birthings when I was young." He nodded and rolled up his sleeves. "Then let's save her." The next hour felt like a battle against nature itself. The cow strained, the calf stuck, the cold making everything harder. Sarah held the lantern, soothed the animal, passed Clayton what he needed. She whispered encouragement through chattering teeth. When the calf finally slipped into Clayton's hands, small and shaking, Sarah felt tears warm her cheeks. Clayton rubbed the calf with straw until it let out a weak cry. The mother turned to nuzzle her newborn, exhausted but alive. "You did good," Clayton said quietly, looking at Sarah with something new in his eyes. Respect, maybe something deeper. "You did most of it," she answered softly. They lingered for a moment, sharing a small, breathless victory in the frozen barn. Then Clayton stood abruptly. "We need to get back before the cold takes us." The walk back was worse. Halfway across the storm-whipped yard, Sarah slipped. The wind spun her sideways, pulling her off the rope. In an instant, everything disappeared into white. Panic shot through her chest. "Clayton!" she cried out, but the wind swallowed her voice. Then a strong arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her back to the rope, steadying her. "I told you not to let go," Clayton growled, his voice rough but steadier than the storm. He held her close as they fought for each step until the cabin door finally closed behind them. Inside, both were shaking from the cold. Clayton helped her out of the coat, his fingers brushing her arms. "That was foolish," he said. "The animals needed us," she replied, teeth chattering. Clayton stared at her a long moment. "You've got more grit than most men I know." As they warmed by the fire, Clayton poured coffee. Sarah's hands still trembled as she wrapped them around the cup, feeling the heat return little by little. "You've done that before," he said quietly. "The way you handled the calf." She nodded. "Before, everything changed. He didn't push. He just waited." Sarah took a shaky breath. "I was engaged once, back in Missouri, to a merchant's son. He made promises. I believed him. Then I found out I was carrying his child." Clayton's jaw tightened. "When I told him, he denied everything. Called me a liar. Said I was trying to trap him." Sarah swallowed hard. "The shock took the baby, and he spread stories so fast that by morning I was ruined." The cabin fell silent except for the fire's crackle. "You didn't deserve that," Clayton said at last, his voice low with something like anger. "Not any of it." She wiped a tear quickly. "The rumors follow me. They always do. That's why I can't stay anywhere long." Clayton looked into the fire. "End of story. This land is far from anywhere. People don't come out here unless they're lost or stubborn." He hesitated before speaking again. "You can stay here until the storm breaks. After that, we'll see." His voice was cautious, but his eyes carried something different, something softer. Sarah's heart tightened. She shouldn't want more than a few nights of safety. But sitting in the warm cabin with the storm outside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As night settled thick around them, Clayton laid out the blankets near the fire again. "You take the bed tonight," he said. "I can't do that," Sarah protested. "It's not a debate." He turned away before she could argue. When she climbed into the bed, she could smell faint traces of soap and leather and something steady and comforting that could only be Clayton Reed. In the dark, she whispered, "Thank you for everything." From the floor, Clayton answered softly, "Get some rest. Morning comes early." But sleep didn't come easy. Sarah stared at the ceiling, listening to Clayton breathe, feeling the warmth of the bed around her. She knew she couldn't stay. She also knew she didn't want to leave, not ever. The storm broke on the 7th morning, leaving behind a world covered in deep, shining snow. The prairie looked almost peaceful under the pale sun, but Sarah felt anything but peaceful. She stood at the window watching Clayton walk a path toward the barn, his steps slow but steady. Something had changed between them during the long storm. Something quiet, something dangerous to her heart. Clayton returned to the house with a worried look on his face. 3 chickens froze in the night, he said, and 2 of the older cattle didn't make it. Sarah reached for her gloves. "Then let me help more today. There's plenty to do." "You've already done more than your share," he replied. "I'm staying," she said softly, "until you tell me you don't want my help anymore." Clayton held her gaze just a little too long, then nodded. But trouble came before they could begin their chores. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, dark figures against the snow. Sarah knew instantly something was wrong. She recognized their posture, the way they held themselves. Men accustomed to getting what they wanted by force. Clayton's jaw clenched. "Get inside." "I'm not hiding," she whispered. "We stand together then," he replied. The riders stopped in front of the porch. The leader, Hutchkins, removed his hat with a mocking smile. "Clayton Reed," he drawled, "we heard you've been harboring a woman. Thought we'd offer our help." "She's here as my employee," Clayton said firmly. "She's under my protection." Hutchkins laughed. "A woman with her reputation?" "Protection from what? Ourselves?" His eyes slid toward Sarah with something ugly in them. Clayton shifted, blocking Hutchkins' view. "You're leaving," Clayton said. "Now." But Hutchkins wasn't done. "She's nothing but trouble," he sneered. "Women like that don't get shelter for free." Sarah stiffened, shame and anger twisting together, but Clayton didn't flinch. "She earns her keep," he said, "and you'll keep your distance." The riders hesitated. Clayton's stance, calm but ready, made them think twice. Finally, Hutchkins spat into the snow. "This ain't over," he growled. As they rode away, Sarah's hands shook. "They'll be back." So will I, Clayton answered. They won't touch you. Not while I'm breathing. The words struck her deep. Later that afternoon, as they tended the cattle together, Sarah felt the question burning inside her. Clayton, why are you risking so much for me? He didn't answer at first. He worked in silence, breathing slow, steady. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were raw with truth. Because before you came, this house was just walls and wood. I didn't realize how empty it had become until you brought life back into it. Back into me. Sarah swallowed hard. I don't want to bring you trouble. I'll take trouble over loneliness, he said quietly. Every time. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She found Clayton sitting by the dying fire, rifle across his knees. You're keeping watch, she whispered. He nodded. Storm or not, danger doesn't wait. She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. The silence between them felt fragile and warm. You think they'll return? She asked. I know they will. Men like Hutchkins don't forget being told no. A long pause. Clayton, if I stay here after the storm, people will talk. They talk anyway. It could ruin what reputation you still have. He turned toward her then, gently but completely. My reputation doesn't matter to me, but you do. Sarah felt something break open inside her. They think I traded my body for shelter, she whispered. They're wrong, he said firmly. If anyone's getting anything from this bargain, it's me. She laughed softly, tears burning her eyes. Clayton, what is this between us? He reached for her hand, slowly giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. I don't know what to call it, he said, but I know it's real. They sat like that until morning, and then the riders returned. This time not just Hutchkins, but a mob from town, led by Reverend Blackwood. Their horses kicked up snow as they surrounded the ranch. Their voices were loud, angry, poisoned. Send the woman out, the Reverend shouted. Her presence has cursed this land. Sarah stepped closer to Clayton. Her entire life she had been blamed for things she did not do. Shamed, cast out, but not today, not here. Stay behind me, Clayton said, stepping forward with his rifle. You'd fight your own neighbors for a fallen woman? Someone shouted. Clayton's voice was steady. I'd fight for what's right. Tension thickened, and in a heartbeat everything snapped. A gun fired. Chaos erupted. Clayton shoved Sarah to the ground as bullets hit the porch railing. He returned fire with the calm, deadly precision of a man who knew violence too well. But there were too many of them. A bullet tore into his shoulder, sending him sprawling. Clayton! Sarah cried, dragging him inside as he gritted his teeth against the pain. The mob regrouped outside. Voices rose, demanding she be sent out, threatening to burn the ranch. Sarah's hands shook as she cleaned Clayton's wound, tears falling freely. This is my fault, she whispered. No, he rasped. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. I'm not losing you. When Hutchkins broke down the door with a roar, Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed Clayton's rifle, aimed, and fired. Hutchkins fell backward into the snow. The mob scattered, shocked. They hadn't expected her to fight. As dawn broke, the riders finally retreated. Shame, fear, or simple cowardice sent them home. Sarah stayed by Clayton's side through the night, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of sleep. When he finally woke, the first thing he did was look for her. You stayed, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere, she said, tears in her voice. Not ever. Clayton reached weakly for her hand. Then, marry me, he said softly. Not to fix anything, not to make it proper, but because I love you, more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. Sarah broke. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. They went to town together once he healed. Dirty looks followed them, but Clayton's hand in hers gave her strength. They stood before the justice of the peace, a few kind witnesses watching, and became husband and wife. Clayton Reed gave Sarah a name, a home, a place in the world she thought she had lost forever. And she gave him warmth, purpose, and love he thought he would never feel again. Months later, as spring flowers bloomed across their land, Sarah stood on the porch of the ranch, their ranch, watching Clayton work the cattle. She was no longer the woman who had arrived at his door, half frozen and half broken. She was Sarah Reed, wife, partner, beloved. Together they built a life stronger than any storm. And they kept every promise of forever.